Okay, and let me share my screen with everyone here. Okay, so welcome. Today we will be going over an amazing event on Together We Mentor Becoming a Psychiatrist. And before we get started, we have some agenda items. So Kayla will go ahead and present about Mi Mentor, just for anyone who might be a bit new about Mi Mentor, what we do, our mission, and how we accomplish that. We have two amazing speakers today, Dr. Tomas Parisi and Dr. Doug Acuna. At the end, we'll close out with a post-event survey. And I know folks might be asking for perhaps their contact information after we're done, but in order for everyone to have access to that, you'll have to fill out the post-event survey so that we can go ahead and share that information. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Kayla to talk about a little bit about Mi Mentor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And I know that it's been a busy week and everybody has their stuff, but thank you so much for being here. So I've been part of Mi Mentor since about the beginning, 2016. I was looking for a place in where, especially after college, where they would be supportive and we would have different resources and opportunities. And well, I found Mi Mentor. And Mi Mentor's mission is to be able to support and inspire the next generation of diverse healthcare leaders and for underserved communities. And I truly feel that that's why I've been part of it in different ways since 2016, and I continue to be inspired by it. And I am looking forward to, not only right now, but looking forward to when I'm also a physician, to continue to contribute. And I hope that today's workshop not only answers the questions that you guys have, but inspires you also in your journey. So without further ado, I am passing it to Bianca.
Hey, hello everyone. Let's please give a warm welcome to Dr. Thomas Parisi. Dr. Parisi began his career in the mental health field in 2002. He works in a compassionate and non-judgmental fashion, offering comprehensive mental health care for adults, adolescents, and seniors. He is the founder of Ashcare, a Panaker group, and he is educated as a psychiatrist and as a marriage and family therapist. Dr. Parisi graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa from Claremont McKenna College with his degree in literature. He has subsequently completed his graduate degree in clinical psychology at Antioch University. After working as a psychotherapist and clinical supervisor, he returned to academics to get his medical degree at Western University of Health Sciences, then completed his psychiatry residency at Loma Linda University.
Okay, so real honor to be here. Mi Mentor has been a very important part of my life for many years. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, where I'm from. I'm from Los Angeles, specifically the San Gabriel Valley and East LA, even more specifically El Sereno, if anybody knows East LA very well. I was raised in a Mexican household in the San Gabriel Valley. My mom's from Mexico, my dad's from Chicago. So I had a bicultural upbringing. Didn't think about medicine really ever. You know, doctors were people who I saw for 3 minutes, 2 minutes for annual checkups or when I was sick. I didn't really think anything of it. In fact, I intentionally avoided the sciences in my undergraduate training, literature degree, having a good time. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I got into law school. I was going to go to law school. Decided against that. again, medicine never crossed my mind. I graduated Claremont McKenna in '99 with the degree in literature, did pretty well. Again, bypassed law school, chose not to do that. I didn't really know what to do, so I taught in South LA for a while, in the LA Unified School District, public schools. I taught fourth graders who were, well, most of them were from Mexico. Some were first gen. And, you know, I appreciated the connection with the culture, but teaching really wasn't for me at the time. I think I was just too young to appreciate it. I got into my own personal process of my own psychotherapy as the client and thought it was very interesting. So I thought, okay, I'll go and get a master's degree. And I went and I got a master's degree in clinical psychology at a touchy-feely university in West LA called Antioch, where, you know, the whole thrust is, you know, your inner process of who you are as an individual in society and the world, how you can make it a better place. I enjoyed my training there. Again, I never thought of medicine. I did an internship where you have to do 3,000 hours of clinical training, where that means you're seeing. Well, I wasn't a doctor then, so what I called clients. You're seeing your clients for 3,000 hours to get this marriage and family therapist license. So I thought it was very interesting. Every now and then I would come across psychiatrists in internships. They always struck me as very interesting. They were prescribing medications. I truthfully didn't really know what the medications were for. I look back on that now and I kind of laugh at myself a little bit. These were just doctors who were dealing with the patients who had the more serious issues and giving them pills that somehow made those issues get better. They tended to be a little bit more approachable than other doctors who I had encountered in my life. But again, it never occurred to me to go into medicine. I practiced as a psychotherapist in West LA for about 12 years, from a eclectic, humanistic, depth-oriented approach with my clientele. Things were going very well. My practice was successful. I enjoyed the work that I did. I had good hours. Clients over the years would go and see psychiatrists when their problems were such that they needed a higher level of care than what talk therapy could afford them. And I began to see that the changes that occurred with these clients were just incredible. You added an antidepressant or some sort of anti-anxiety agent, and I didn't really know what these meds were, even though I had the master's in clinical psychology and I was and am a psychotherapist. I didn't know what they were, but these patients' lives were changing drastically. They would leave what were highly dysfunctional relationships. They would change careers. They would get in shape. They would drastically change their lives, and it was amazing to behold. So it got me thinking, you know, how is this happening? Well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that we added psychiatry, right? So again, never thought of it for me. I hit age 30, my daughter was born, and I thought, goodness, I got to do something more. And so I thought, you know what? I've always been real good at the liberal arts. I've always been good at writing things, reading things, talking about things, good with people. But I don't really feel challenged. I didn't feel that I was really tapping my potential. There was just something in me that was itching. And I thought, oh, you know, medicine had crossed my mind since the birth of my daughter. Medicine had crossed my mind as I became a patient who, you know, accepted psychiatry into my life, and it was very helpful. So I thought, okay, this is something. My therapist at the time, who was also a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst, he was the first doctor who I knew who really touched my life. And I thought, wow, you know, he's a doctor. That means he went to medical school. He's giving me therapy. It's very meaningful. He's very down to earth. I could really relate to him. He's really helping me hands-on, and he's prescribing me a medication or two. This all seems very, very real. Like I can do that. So again, I had no biomedical science training. I took astronomy in undergrad, and then human sexuality to get my no joke, to get my requirements done to graduate. So I thought, okay, I'll go become a doctor. So what did I do? I live in El Sereno. What's the closest medical school in East LA? It's Keck. I called Keck and I said, I'm a psychotherapist in LA, and I think I want to be a doctor. I said, what do I do? And they said, well, it's a big deal. It's a big endeavor. They said, why don't you go volunteer in a hospital to see if you really want to do it? And by this point, I had already Googled how to become a doctor. Can you do it online? Can you do it at night? I had really looked into these things. I had no idea. I didn't know any doctors in my life except the ones who had treated me and just, you know, my psychiatrist at the time. So I called Huntington Hospital in Pasadena. If you know LA, you know Huntington. They were very, very nice. I went there, did the training. I began working with mainly Hispanic population. A lot of them didn't speak English. None of them had insurance. And I co-spearheaded a medication clinic where we help these patients to get free medication. Not just psych meds, but any medication that they had on their list, on their regimen. I would help them to process the paperwork to get free medication. And it was wonderful. It was life-changing. I liked patient care. Patients liked me. I liked the hospital setting. I liked how social it was. I liked that I was doing something that people really, really needed. I made good friends that I have to this day. In fact, I'm trying to get on staff at Huntington as we speak. I'm in that process that takes 6 months to complete. I thought, you know what? I like this. I'm going to sign up for pre-medical courses. Now, I didn't have one. I didn't even know what a valence electron was, okay? So I signed up for Introduction to General Chemistry, which is a summer course. And I got into the first or second class at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science in South LA, which had just severed its tie from Martin Luther King Medical Center. It's across the street from there in South LA at about 122nd Street, off the 105. And I was very fortunate, very blessed, because there were like 4 people in the class. So I had the professors all to myself, and I needed that. And I stayed late, I stayed after, I got involved. I was very Pollyanna about it. I had no idea what was going on. I was just working hard and trying to get A's. And then I learned what valence electrons were. And then I took general chemistry with lab, and general bio, and then general physics, and then OChem, and it goes on, biochemistry. And I learned sciences through chemistry, which of course inspired me becoming a psychiatrist. Of course, because of my mental health background. Well, here I am now, I'm a psychiatrist. I did well in the post-baccalaureate program. I had to stop to get a divorce. That was difficult, so I withdrew from that program for several years. So that pre-medical, post-baccalaureate period of my life took ages and ages. I think it took like 6 years. Pardon me. I was co-parenting with my ex, still am, for who was then a baby, a little tiny kid. And so I had to balance being a single dad with this pre-medical road. I prepared for the MCAT. I took 4 prep courses. I took it twice. Maybe I took it 3 times. I don't remember. At least twice. It blew me out of the water. And it's not for a lack of effort, that's for sure. I had closed down my psychotherapy practice just before getting into medical school. Because I have a child, I only applied to programs on the MD and DO side, but only within 1 hour of Los Angeles, because I was not about to uproot my child in light of all the changes she had already been through. I got in, I took interviews in Arizona and up north as well, just for the sake of experience, knowing that I wouldn't leave if I got those chances. I got into Western University of Health Sciences in Pomona, California, and I thought, great, it's 38 minutes from my front door in El Sereno. Sounds good. By this time, I had moved back in with family, with my daughter, to help me to raise her and to go to school. I got to rewind a little bit. In the pre-medical road, I got introduced to LMSA, Latino Medical Students Association, and I got introduced to them at a pre-med conference at UC Irvine. There, just these conferences that you see advertised. And I went. The pre-medical road, I don't know if anybody can relate to it, if you've heard anybody go through it. It can be very isolating. And I went to this meeting at UCI, and everybody was Latino, and I thought, this is fantastic. I mean, it was just wonderful. And they all wanted to be doctors. Some had become doctors. They were on the road. They were talking about MCATs. I didn't even know what that was. They were talking about, biochemistry and residency. I didn't know what those things were. And I was already in my pre-med life. So I got a taste of LMSA. Then I began to go to their annual conferences, and then quarterly conferences, regional conferences. I began to get to know physicians, working physicians, Hispanic physicians, who would spend time with me and talk to me and ask me about my life. And it began to become more real. I could be a person with problems and responsibilities, baggage, a life. I can connect to people, and I'm not so alone because I have my community. Fast forwarding again, got into Western University in Pomona. Again, spent a lot of time volunteering there when I could, with the local underserved community, which happened to be mainly Hispanic. I struggled deeply in medical school. I failed gross anatomy. I had to retake it. I passed by the skin of my teeth a number of other courses. It was demoralizing to see people 10 years younger than me who had been trained their whole lives to become doctors, sleeping through classes and breezing through the coursework, acing everything. And now we're dear friends today, but it was very very difficult. And there was only 1 other or 2 other Hispanic people there at Western University, so that was even more difficult. So I would come back to my LMSA, Latino Medical Students Association community, and what then evolved into Mi Mentor. I was part of the first pulse of Mi Mentor. I eventually earned a position of leadership as vice president of mentorship. That was very meaningful, to be able to reach out, touch lives, connect with people who, like me, needed direction. Finished medical school somehow, made it through the boards. Then it was time to match. So it was the same thing where I thought, you know what? I'm not going to leave. I'm going to be within an hour of LA. So I was very limited in my approach. It was very difficult. I got a lot of criticism for it. I got into Loma Linda University Health Center, which is in the city of Redlands. which is instead of 38 minutes from my front door, it's 65 minutes from my front door. So I commuted from East LA to Redlands every day of residency, which I also deeply struggled with. There were no other Hispanics. It was very conservative, very, very right-wing conservative, heavy Christian. I couldn't relate. And at that point with residency, I mean, you're pretty busy. I wasn't as connected with my Mi Mentor and LMSA community as I had been, and it hurt. Every now and then, some of the doctors would reach out, but there's kind of a thing where when you're in residency, they just kind of let you be because they know what a high-flying act that could be. So I finished residency. I had to focus again on one of my board exams. The testing was very difficult for me. The breakneck pace was very, very difficult for me. Feeling culturally alone was very difficult for me. But I got through it. You know, once you get there, you get through it. You find a way, you get through it. I graduated. I have a small boutique practice in LA. I do part-time work for Kaiser, where I see their patients in the Sunset office in Hollywood and the Pasadena office as well. So they're funneled to me remotely, actually. So it works very well as a person starting a career. I might be looking more deeply into a job with the state hospitals. So that's working with the criminally insane. So doing that as I develop my own practice. Like I said, I'm exploring a position on staff at Huntington Hospital in Pasadena. Yeah, the road to medicine, the road to residency, the match. I was always a guy for whom school came easily. I got A's in college. I didn't try that hard. I'm not flossing. I'm just telling you how it is because I bet a lot of you can relate to that. After all, you're here. And so medicine tested me like nothing else has ever tested me in my life. My stick-to-itiveness. I had to get tested for ADHD. I had to get medicated for what was called adult onset. What I realize now was undiagnosed as a kid. You know, I went through all that, had accommodations when I could. You know, that treatment trained me to be able to now focus without any of that kind of thing. But you learn a lot about yourself. You learn what your limitations are. I reached out to family for help. I reached out to doctors for help. I took time off to take care of myself. I had to focus on a board exam again. And you know what? If you go home with nothing else, go home with that you're not alone. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, believe me, people have struggled with it. Doctors are under more scrutiny than any other profession on the planet because we touch a lot of lives and because people want what we have. So, you know, the problems that doctors have are like problems that any other people have. And a lot of times doctors don't really have a forum to work those things out. Mi Mentor is a very safe place. LMSA was a very safe place. It's a long, hard road that's absolutely worth it because you get to see people in their best moments of life and their worst moments of life, and they're looking to you for something very real, very intimate, very important to them. We're in positions of power, and we don't just show up that way. It's because we've been without power in one of many ways in our lives. So I welcome your questions. I'm really honored to be here. It's great to be done with residency for a lot of reasons, but one huge reason is that I can be back in touch with Mi Mentor and the community and helping people out and connecting and being a person again. Thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parisi. And it was just really great listening to you, your journey, and really just being very vulnerable and honest about that. So thank you so much for sharing. And we'll definitely have questions at the end. Um, and as you can see, those reactions, you definitely share that really, really wisely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because we have another amazing speaker, Dr. Acuna. And just for folks to know a little bit more about Dr. Acuna, he is a native New York, educated at the City College of New York and NYU Medical School. He completed his residency in general adult psychiatry at the Cambridge Health Alliance in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2021, and currently holds an appointment with Harvard Medical School as a lecturer in psychiatry. He recently started a position with the Indian Health Service in Zuni Pueblo, New Mexico, and divides his time between Zuni and Cambridge. His interests include recovery-based care for serious mental illness, SMI, public health, and healing complex trauma. And without further ado, the floor is yours, Dr. Cunha.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. So my name is Camilo Acuna. I'm from New York City. My also bicultural. My father is a Black Panamanian from the capital, from Panama, who was raised in the Bronx. And my mom is Chilena, raised in New Haven. And then, of course, they met in New York City, because where else do you find Panamanians and Chileans meeting together? Yeah, so I went to school in New York. I basically all of school, all of my education was there. I went to the City College of New York. I went to the it's a little different. I went to a BSMD program, so kind of like a accelerated pipeline program called the Sophie Davis program at CUNY. And so at that, just basically I started doing my pre-medical studies. I did that. We had it sort of compressed into 3 years, and kind of breezed through the pre-med stuff. And then we had a summer portion where we were started doing like primary care, kind of shadowing at a clinic in Lower Manhattan. And I just with that one, we started to get patients, and it became different. It wasn't just taking tests, and it was showing getting there on time, being organized, and it's sort of a different skill set. And at the end of it, basically the course instructor came to me and he said, "Hey, look, you're really on the border here. I could fail you. You're a smart kid. I don't want to, but I need to know that your heart is in this." So he gave me an option. He said, my recommendation is take a year off. Think about whether you really want to do this, whether you really want to do medicine. And you gotta have you gotta leave it open for the possibility that you might not come back to this. And if you do come back, you come back and you come back dedicated, you come back strong. Just like, this is crazy. What are you talking about? Why would I take a year off? And I actually talked to, so at that point, I had already been introduced to what at that time was the National Boricua Health Organization on the East Coast. So I was able to talk to other students who were in the same pathway as me, and who were a senior to me. And I had talked to someone who actually had taken a year off, and she really told me that how it really had helped her think about what her priorities were, and what her goals were in medicine, and to kind of like get recentered. And so I went back to so my professor, and he said, like, okay, you can retake the course or you can take a year off. And I said, I think I'm going to take a year off. And so I took a year, and I went to Chile, which I had been to Chile, I think, like once before. And I spent time in Chile, actually, getting to know more about particularly like indigenous cultural practices and indigenous like healing and medical sort of the role of traditional healers in Mapuche culture and in the south of Chile, which is where my mom is from. And I came back. I worked in a pizzeria, made pizza for a summer, and then I joined a project in Zambia, doing a sort of surveys of the rural communities in Zambia, looking at access to and uptake of HIV related healthcare. So there were totally like different experiences, got me out of New York City, and just give me just different perspective on kind of global health and and rural health. Decided I still wanted to do medicine, and it kind of gave me a new fervor for the field. So I came back, said to my friends, all right, I'm coming back, I'm here. Started med school classes, so jumped into anatomy, and just like I had way more energy than the rest of my classmates who had just gone straight. And I just realized I really like the fact of having taken that time really helped me have that verve, that energy for it, the enthusiasm. So then the way the pipeline program worked is we did all of our pre-med stuff and our preclinical stuff at City College. And it works a little different now, but at the time we would transfer over to another medical school for our clinical training. So I went to NYU, so also in Manhattan, and was training at Bellevue Hospital and at NYU and at the VA. Was suddenly dropped into a new group of classmates. So had a whole bunch of new faces who all knew each other because they had been in class for the last 2 years together, and I knew like 6 people. But then went into rotations, into clinical stuff, and was excited. And then around I guess about a year in, I was doing internal medicine, which was just grueling, as it was an exhausting rotation to be on. So you're working 6 days a week. You're there from like 6 in the morning to like 6 at night. And yeah, it was a different sort of thing. There just wasn't time for studying. I would also been used to kind of like, all right, I glance at the textbook, I take the test, I'm good. And this just, there really wasn't it really wasn't like you could just take a glance at the textbook. You had to be learning constantly. You really had to be paying attention. You had to be thinking. You had to be, using basically all your spare time for reading and for looking up articles. And it was just a whole different kind of challenge. And really, I think that was a point where I was really doubting myself, and talking to friends about like, did I make a mistake? So at this point, it was 2014. It was about 7 years into a decision I had made when I was like 15. Thankfully I had friends to rely on, people who really bolstered me, who gave me encouragement, both at my school and through LMSA. So at that point, the National Boricua Health Organization had changed its name to be part of the national organization of LMSA. So I had people, I had mentors, I had, you know, classmates who were just really encouraging, and that was very, very powerful. And then one of my best friends, my best childhood friends, had a psychotic break, and was homeless for a while. He was spent a lot of times like sort of coming in and out of my apartment, sleeping in my place. So I was like dealing with that, as well as like still trying to be in in the hospital. I ended up failing internal medicine and had to so I got it incomplete and had to retake that. So made through the rest of the year and through the rest of my rotations, and then got to internal medicine. Actually got to surgery, and then actually failed my surgery boards, had to retake my surgery boards, took the surgery boards again, passed the second time, then got to internal medicine again. Now I'm taking internal medicine. This time I felt like I was more prepared for it. I was doing, I was doing a lot better. I was reading, I knew like I had to buckle down, like this really was going to be an all-consuming experience. And then another one of my childhood friends died in a hiking accident in Mexico. And so that was really, really hard. And I ended up finishing the rotation, and passing. As I finished my clinical year, and I said I was going to take a year off, but I couldn't stay in student housing unless I was enrolled in the medical school. And I also was worried that residencies would look unfavorably at a year off in the middle, between third and fourth year, if I just took like a personal leave. So I decided I was going to do some research. At that point, I had been thinking about psychiatry. So to kind of go back, when I started out, I was really convinced I was going to do family medicine. Like that was my goal. That was my, that was the idea. I was like, I want to do primary care. I want to, to kind of like work at the root of the problem, right? Be doing preventive care. And the program that I had gone to at City College was like very focused on primary care and family medicine. And it was like all about like its mission statement is to produce more primary care physicians, particularly primary care physicians of color and primary care physicians who practice in communities of color. So that was my idea. And then I remember when I got to NYU and I was interviewing for the spot at NYU, and I was talking to one of the deans, and he said, "Yeah, so any thoughts on what you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about family medicine, but I'm open to other things." And he goes, "That's fine. Nobody really does primary care here. It's okay." And in fact, NYU didn't have a department of family medicine. So I ended up having to find my own rotation for family medicine. I went out to Crown Point, New Mexico with the Navajo Nation and did a rotation in family medicine in rural New Mexico, and came back. But then I had also had this really great experience with psychiatry. I did my rotation on the forensic unit at Bellevue. So we get patients from Rikers Island. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of Rikers Island, but it's a very famous jail in New York that functions as a prison, but it's not really meant to be a long-term prison. It's really rough. So when they need a psychiatric hospitalization, they send folks over to the unit at Bellevue. So that's where I did my rotation. And then I also was working at a community clinic, and it kind of just hit me how psychiatry really, it did a lot of what I loved about family medicine, that there was a kind of preventive aspect, right? Because I was working in this community, this like community family clinic. We were working with families and kids, and and then there was this this sort of foil to that, where I could see like folks who had who hadn't gotten care and who had gotten institutionalized and were kind of back and forth between hospitals and prisons and jails. Sorry, I'm talking a lot longer than I thought I would. And so I realized that there was this opportunity, to like work with people before things became more, before the problems became more developed, more serious, and to sort of interrupt trauma and the effects of trauma and the effects of generational trauma. So I ended up doing, I took that year off. I did some research. I worked with a researcher doing parent interventions. I ended up, I tried to do a master's degree so I could stay in student housing. It ended up being too much, and I ended up dropping out of the master's degree. And that was sort of a lesson in, in taking time to grieve and taking time, for self-care. Returned to med school classes after that, finished up the year. And then applied to residency. I applied to a community hospital in Massachusetts. I was also university affiliated with Harvard. That was my first time living outside of New York. Like actually permanently living outside of New York. And then at the end, I decided I wanted to come back to IHS and come back to New Mexico, where I had that family medicine experience. And so I just moved out here 2 weeks ago, and I am sitting in my house in New Mexico now, in Zuni Pueblo. So that's me. Did I make it, Joanna?
No,
Did I-
you did great, Dr. Acuna. You see, like, honestly, once folks start sharing their story, like, it's been really a pleasure hearing both of your stories and journeys, and just being very honest about it, because personally for me, as a pre-medical, like non-linear, non-traditional pre-med student, like I don't hear that a lot, from physicians, and really just sharing their struggles. So I just want to thank you both for being very, very open. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Bianca, who will go ahead and share the first question. And this is an open forum, everyone. So feel free to, if you feel like unmuting yourself and asking that question, please, feel free to do that, or even chatting in the question in the chat box. So I'll pass it over to you, Bianca.
Thank you, Joanna. Give me 1 second. Okay, first question. What are the rewards and / challenges of the psychiatry specialty, and how can we learn if that would be a good fit?
Go ahead, Dr. Acuna.
Okay.
Gosh, the rewards are great, and the challenges are also great. I love that people tell you their stories. You get to hear just phenomenal stories. You get to learn about people, about humans and being human. I feel like being a psychiatrist helps me with my own life and relationships in major ways. And then I've also found that, like, because I'm like attuned in that, my relationships and interactions with people help me become a better psychiatrist. I think if you love stories, if you love like narrative and learning about, and like are genuinely interested in how people live and how people survive and overcome struggle, it is an immensely rewarding field. There's more, but I'll let Dr. Parisi answer.
I think what Dr. Acuna is saying is how I feel about it in many regards. You really learn what makes people tick. And it keeps you sharp. Even though we're prescribing medication, I give therapy to a lot of people. And even in medication management only, there is an element of emotionality in therapy. you're challenged to keep growing as an individual. You're challenged to be vulnerable. You're challenged to be humble. You're challenged to connect, even while you're busy and overwhelmed and have 35,000 things that you got to take care of. So it's an honor to have to be your best at every turn.
Thank you both very much. The next question is for either of you who how do you address your own mental health as you work with your patients?
Yeah, so therapy, go to therapy. Therapy is good. There's a bunch of 12-step programs out there for substances as well as for emotional stuff. So, there's a bunch of free things out there in the world. When you need psychiatry, go ask for it. I personally hike, I camp, I like shopping, dedicated to my daughter and raising her. She'll be 16 in a month or so, which is an awful age. I like to travel. I like to exercise, and I like to eat right. Self-care is paramount.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with everything Dr. Parisi said. Yeah, self-care is paramount. And, it's also an iterative process. Like this, all of this is really iterative. Unfortunately, it's not like you get it and okay, I understand self-care and I understand how to do this. And now I'm good, I'm golden. I go through periods of time where I'm exercising, I'm on my bike all the time, I'm eating right, I'm doing well, I'm going to therapy. Absolutely, definitely want to co-sign that therapy piece. Regardless of what you do, just therapy, and finding a therapist that works for you, right? Not just any therapist, but the therapist that you have a good connection with. Yeah, it's awesome. That said, I didn't have healthcare for a few months because I was in between jobs. Moved to New Mexico, still haven't found a therapist. I had an event right after work, a community event right after work that I had to go to, and then ran from there straight to my house. I ate a box of fried chicken on the way here, in the car, wash it down with the soda, so it's not 100%, but you just keep working on it, and also just be gentle with yourself, and understand that you're human, that you're not going to be perfect all the time. We certainly aren't.
Thank you for answering the question. Next question is, can you share a slice of your life of what your typical week looks like?
Yeah, sure. I work Monday through Saturday. Sometimes I work half the day Sunday. With Kaiser, I'll pull 10-hour shifts, and I don't take a break. I just take a break in between patients because, eventually you get quick when you need to be. I'm at my own practice. What was 2 half days is now compressed into one very long day, like an 11-hour day. I've been moving recently, so that's been busy. So I've been taking a course with the Sierra Club. It's another self-care thing. And so that got me off of my exercise routine, which was pretty rigorous. So trying to get back to that, which is, 4 or 5 times a week, really rigorous cardio with weights attached to it. My daughter comes and goes as she pleases. So that's just a thing where I'm just a chauffeur essentially. And you gotta go pick up groceries and drop off dry clean, and maybe watch a little TV, return emails. I have my own business, so that's a whole other planet where, I have people helping me with it, lawyers, things with the banks, to have an infrastructure, some networking, signing up for, insurance panels if you want to do that. So I'm extremely busy.
So this is literally my first week of seeing patients in Zuni. So I don't know about a typical week, but I can tell you what this week looks like. And I can tell you what weeks at prior jobs look like. So yeah, this week I've been picking up new patients, adults. I've got folks who are dealing with grief, who've had loved ones die, parents, family members. I've had a older fellow who came in after his wife just left him a couple weeks ago. A lot of folks with suicidal ideation, had also some kids. So I'm seeing all ages here. So I also had a referral for a teenager from her therapist to come to do a evaluation for medication. I went, like I said, just went to a community event right after clinic today. Focus on, that was a alcohol awareness and suicide prevention event. Yeah, then tomorrow I'm going to be actually doing some work embedded inside the primary care clinic, doing consultations for primary care doctors. So I'm kind of all over the place at this job. I'm seeing all ages. I'm doing consults, I'm doing medication, I'm doing therapy. So there's a really wide range of things that you can do in psychiatry, which is actually one of the things I love about it. I just spent the last 6 months working locums jobs. So locum tenens is basically, it's like contract work. So you can either contract directly, or like I did, contract through a company, and they find you different jobs, different hospitals or different clinics. You work there for a few days or a few weeks, a few months. So I would drive out, when I was in Massachusetts, I'd drive out to Western Mass about 2 hours and spend 4 days, 3 or 4 days, basically just living in a psych hospital, being on call 24 hours a day for 4 days, and then come home and have have the rest of the week off. And it's grueling, but it also meant I had I also had a 3 or 4 day weekend. And I also got paid twice what I'm getting paid right now, working for the government. So it can be, it really can be anything you want to make it. And your schedule can be real.
Oh, thank you very much. We have a few other questions. This was asked by Stephanie Soriano Cruz for Dr. Tom Parisi. You've mentioned exploring various different career paths and eventually getting a master's in psychology before going on to medical school. How do you recommend people with limited experience within the field apply to these programs?
Okay, so you want to apply to how to apply to medical school programs, right?
It was mostly for the master's in psychology. What do you discuss within the application, or how do you sort of demonstrate that you're passionate about the field?
Yeah, I think you have to demonstrate your own desire to grow as an emotional entity, and as well as your own desire to touch other people's lives. Typically in that realm, people want to see that you've walked through challenges, that you've learned something, and that you're better for it. That's kind of the equation, if there's going to be one. What's been hard and knocked me down? How did I get up? And what did I learn? And now, why do I like people so darn much? And I want to help them a lot. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, the next question. Give me 1 second. Okay. Next question is, having had treatment for mental health, was going into psychiatry ever triggering to you?
That could be for either one of you.
The question was
I'll
having
repeat. Oh, sorry about that. You didn't hear it. Do you want me to repeat it?
having had mental health issues. Is that it?
Yeah,
Is then going into psychiatry, is it triggering?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's something called countertransference, which is, let's say that I've gone through whatever I've gone through, we'll call it challenge number 35. And the person in front of you, the patient, is also going through challenge number 35. You will absolutely be triggered. Yeah. And so then it's your job to look within and be there for them. Yeah, get ready for that. It happens on a regular basis, especially the more that you live life.
Yeah, definitely agree. Countertransference. I think that the difference between psychiatrists and other doctors is not that we have these, unique experience so much as that we talk about them. Just any kind of doctor, you're gonna see patients who remind you of people you know. You're gonna see an abuelita with diabetes who's going blind, and it's gonna remind you of your tia. You're gonna see things that are hard and difficult, and it's gonna touch you, and it's gonna remind you of things. Certainly as a psychiatrist, when you start delving into those things, like you're forced to look at them really closely, but it also offers a lens and a toolkit for dealing with them. And like having your own therapy throughout it, and having supervisors to talk to about your countertransference, having peers who you can talk to about, like, oh man, I'm seeing this patient, like he reminds me of me, or like this guy looks like what I'm afraid I will be in 20 years. Like I've definitely had that, and it's like, oh shit, like what, both like learning from that, but also learning to separate yourself and remember that, like, oh yeah, but they're not me, or they're not my tia, they're their own person, is its own challenge. But it is so rewarding, again, when you get through that and you're like, wow, like I just grew so much.
Thank you both very much. We have a question from Stephanie for Dr. Acuna. How is the process of reflection where you had to decide if medical school was the right career path for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember, this feels like a weird book to reference, but I remember reading Freakonomics like somewhere around that time. And there's not a whole lot that I remember from the book, but I remember that there was this sort of paragraph that it was talking about how you don't necessarily have to do like your career the way other people do their career, but the question is like, what kind of work do you want to do in the world, and what's the best toolkit, right? Like it's sort of like you want to go and get tools to put in your tool belt. And I think I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew I wanted to be able to change how people interact with each other, and prevent problems from arising later on in life. I wanted to do something that was really like preventative and try to like get at the root of illness and trauma, and and like I think I just saw a lot of like really artificial problems in the world, especially like, traveling, but also, in New York, like just a lot of problems that seem to be like, not just like, oh, you got a disease, you got an infection and then you got sick, but like, you got asthma because you lived in this, in an area, of the Bronx that gets, smoke from, the bus depot and from the garbage disposal. And so like, I knew I wanted to do something public health, but I also wanted to do something with, with, with people. And yeah, I think I just kind of decided like, yeah, medicine, like it puts me in a good position for that. And if I want to do like an MPH later on, which I haven't done at this point, but I was like, I can do that. But it just seems like it was a really good toolkit for understanding both biological illness, but also public health. And then of course, as I ended up in, behavioral health, and mental health. And so that was kind of the same decision with psychiatry, that I was like, man, I want to understand people, I want to understand spiritual and mental and biological stuff, and psychiatry is the way to go for that. So it's really about like building the toolkit more than like, oh, I want to do this like X thing that is like predefined.
Thank you so much for answering the question. The next question that I have, came from a student. It seems like it's two questions put together. So I'll read the first one. How do you communicate or approach your patients to feel comfortable to open up? Second question is, how also is your approach different or the same between family marriage counseling and individual counseling?
So I'll give you an example. A lot of times patients will come in and you'll evaluate them during the intake appointment, and you'll realize that they have a substance use disorder and they don't know it. And you only have so much time, and you're not necessarily giving them therapy. You're just there to give them a psychiatric evaluation, and that's it. So I know what's coming. They don't. And I keep that in mind, and I'll say things like, at the beginning of the appointment, I'll say, I have questions that I'm going to ask you that I ask everybody else. It's not a you thing. It's everyone thing. It's the same questions. We all get them. I say, I'm going to say some things that you're going to really vibe with. You're going to like what I say. I might say some other things that you don't like to hear. And I remind them that I tell everyone this. I give everybody this pregame talk. I say that the things I'm about to ask you are personal, they're sensitive. I also have firm boundaries, though. I'll say something like, but this is not a psychotherapy session. Of course, if it's a psychotherapy patient, I'm more of the kind of just let things evolve and let them have their response or their reaction. But if you're in a timed medication evaluation, which you will be if you're a psychiatrist, in many different positions that you'll have, it's really about the setup. I also say things with that example about the person with the substance use disorder. I'll say, there's no judgment here, none whatsoever. It's part of life. At the same time, it's my job to let you know how things affect you. I say it's not a you thing, it's a brain thing. And then I talk about the brain and what certain drugs do. This affects your anxiety, your depression. It affects A, B, and C. Also, and then I talk about the brain and medication, how their substance use will prevent the medication from being as effective as possible. And I'll say these things, and I'll say, it's a free country, it's a free choice, your call. I'm letting you know. I'm also letting you know that help is available. Would you like some? And I just remind them that it's I also encourage their vulnerability, their honesty, and I applaud them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those things. Also, I think this is also really important when you're starting out, and like you're like learning learning the basics of clinical medicine or psychology or whatever it is to remember to treat people as human beings. Because I think a lot of times, you're sort of given a list of, as a student, like, oh, read these questions to them, make sure you get the answer to these questions. Honestly was never very good at that. That was one of the things I had to struggle with, but I think something that really helped me, even get, like, sometimes I wouldn't even ask, I would forget to ask a question, but a patient might volunteer information that would remind me, because they just create a rapport with them, and like treat them like with kindness, with respect, and also like allow yourself to connect with them a little bit, and allow yourself to be human with them, which doesn't necessarily mean being casual with them, although to some extent it might be. But it's just really about, like, bringing your own self into the room and letting them know that you're not just like, a sterile white coat, or you're whatever. Like, it's okay to be a person. Like, that's actually a really important thing, and it does help people feel more comfortable opening up and telling you the answer to the question you forgot to ask. So it just really can't stress that enough.
All right. We have a question for Dr. Parisi from Francis. There is a common misconception that psychiatrists rarely practice psychotherapy and solely focus on medication management in their scope of practice. As a psychiatrist who has an educational and professional experience in both fields of psychology and medicine, how well have you been able to integrate therapy into your own clinical practice?
Well, some of my patients see me only for psychotherapy. Others see me only for medication management, and others see me for a combination of the two. My approach is that we use medication for functioning. It's not happy pills. It's to treat symptoms. It's not going to make you a happy camper. It's not going to make you, it's not going to do that. It's going to make you sleep better, eat more regularly, cry less, have less panic attacks, be less irritable, be less hopeless. It doesn't mean that. So I try to toe that line of helping people to exhaust their natural capacity to evolve and grow. And then when they're at that point where it's like, hey, they're really digging, they're trying really hard, and they can't pull it off. Their functioning is impacted. They're not getting to work on time. They can't engage in conversations because they're falling apart or too reactive. Then I bring aboard medication. So that's how I do it. And I tend to want to find the one medication, if I can, to help people, which doesn't always fly in the world of private practice. I try to optimize psychotherapy before medication, especially also because of adverse reactions. And I find that people really appreciate that for the most part, especially if they are not new to psychiatry. If they've had therapists and psychiatrists, eventually they just want to have one med or no meds. And so the more sophisticated patients tend to really like that. The ones who are brand new to psychiatry, they just don't know that conversation yet. But I know inside that they can grow without meds, unless it's their functioning, and we have to bring them back to life with that. I hope that helps.
Agreed. And I was just add, as far as the like med therapy thing, it also depends on like what training program you go to for residency, how much they'll emphasize one versus the other. But all psychiatry training programs, as far as I know, do involve some therapy training. My sense is there's some, like on the coastal ones tend to be a little bit more therapy oriented. So I actually had a lot of therapy training. Not as much as Dr. Parisi, obviously, but given that I'm just doing the med side.
But my residency, which was also West Coast, was also extremely psychotherapy heavy.
Thank you both for answering that question. The next question is from Jade. Jade is asking, As a psychiatrist, how do you navigate through mental health stigma within patients and the medical field itself?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's, I mean, there's like community level interventions, right? If you're working with a larger organization and you can do things that promote mental health. Like I said, I just went to a community program, a community event that was like, that I did not organize, I just showed up at. You know, there's also like when you're working with patients who might have stigma, like one of the reasons I'm going to work in the primary care clinic tomorrow is to see those patients who don't want to walk over to behavioral health, right? But like, no, and don't want anyone seeing them walk over to behavioral health, right? But like, if the psychiatrist happens to be in the primary care clinic, maybe they'll be okay with that. And then sometimes that's it. So sometimes it's a question of going out and finding the patients and just kind of showing them that you're not so scary and this is okay. And also just normalizing it. Once you do sit down with them, normalizing it, being like, hey, like this is just part of being human. I make the joke often. I sometimes say, like, sometimes you got to go to your dental hygienist, every 6 months, get your teeth cleaned. I'm your mental hygienist. I'm just here to help you, kind of get through some of the gunk that accumulates in normal life.
Very insightful. Thank you. All right. So Vincent Chang asked the next question for either of you. Where do you see psychiatry moving in the next 10 years?
Great question. With COVID, a lot of online psychiatry popped up. It became very accessible on many levels. You can get Adderall tonight if you want it. And so the upside is that there might be less stigma, it's more available, whatever medication it is. But the downside is that it might be too available. People might not be properly diagnosed. People might go ask for something and there might not be high enough caliber of assessment, not because of the clinician at all. We all get the same training, but because of the pressures of the system to fit into a certain box and because of patients' expectations. And if they don't get what they want, then there's a beef, right there. So that's really tricky. I know that in the world of private practice, what I find is that it is growing more slowly than what I understand things to have grown prior to COVID because of how readily available, quick, cheap online medication is, as opposed to this more hands-on, white glove, a lot of caretaking approach that I prefer to do. That's my take.
Thank you both for answering the question. The next question that I have here is from Starlina Dickerson. Her question is, do either of you have a story or a moment that you reflect on often that reminds you of the impact that your work has had on a patient?
There's too many.
Dr. Parisi.
Oh, yeah, there's too many. There's just too many. It's a long list. Go ahead, Dr. Acuna.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, there's too many. There's so many. And I'm sure you have even more than I do, having been in the field longer. But oh man, oh yeah, I can think of one of my And so I'm just like, they're swimming. All right. I had a patient in residency who had been coming to the resident clinic for over 10 years at the time that I inherited him. And he'd never been on medication. He'd always just for therapy. And he never missed an appointment. Like he would bike to every appointment. He had a car, but he was an avid cyclist, and he would bike every time. And it had to be just like straight storming for him to miss the appointment. And I ended up working with him for 2 years, which in residencies is or actually 2.5 years. 2.5 years. I got him in second year. And I worked with him through the end of fourth year, through our graduation, which is a long time in residency, and out of a 4-year residency. But not a long time in the world of therapy generally. And I actually had a supervisor who had supervised his previous therapists. And so I would tell him, and he would, kind of what we talked about. And I remember him, like, especially in my last year, telling me, like, wow, like, he's really opening up to you. Like, he's never talks about his emotions. Like, he's been coming to therapy for like 10 years and like talking about the weather and talking about, what movie he saw last week and then going home. And like, we were talking about like feeling sad and feeling scared and, his relationship with his wife and, his fears about, his wife dying, and her illness and, and grieving for his friend. And it was just this like awesome experience of just getting to hear him open up after more than 10 years of therapy of just coming in, saying hi and going home. And it's just, it's really cool when you get to be the guy at the end of the line, right? Who gets the benefit of like all that work that's been done for the last decade, but it just really emphasized to me just the importance of the connection, right? Of the relationship. Cause I wasn't doing anything that special. I wasn't doing like any kind of like really special therapy, or I wasn't like, using some advanced techniques that like these other guys that my predecessors didn't know. Like, I was just being there. And I think he liked that I also would bike to the therapy sessions, and like the fact that we both had bikes and we both biked there was like this connection. And it was just so gratifying, to see somebody make that kind of progress, in their own emotional growth. And then of course, like I handed, because it's residency, I handed him off to another therapist. So now he's working with somebody else, and now they're getting the fruits of my labor, but they're also getting to do their own work with him. So I just, that was just that relationship, the rapport relationship, the fact of bringing unconditional, in psychiatry it's called a unconditional positive regard for your patient, right? Of letting them know that like whatever they bring, whatever they say, that you're not going to think less of them, that you're not going to judge them. That's a non-judgmental space, right? Sorry, I saw something pop up in the chat.
Dr. Parisi, do you have an experience that you'd like to share with us?
Who experienced complex PTSD. I think it's one thing that Dr. Acuna specializes in. And she had also experienced a very, very serious case of parental alienation. She was debilitated, numerous panic attacks a day, couldn't leave the house. Very smart lady. Been raped a couple of times in her life. Had been framed, had to go through a trial, sort of court trial. Awful, awful PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive memories, through the roof irritability. And it was great to be able to, connect with her. There were some bits about her story that I could relate to, and the medication helped her immensely, and it was really, really inspiring to see her change, especially when you added the meds, because you can't really talk in too much depth with people who are in the throes of very heavy, powerful drama. But the meds can do the trick. So that was very inspiring to see her sleep normalize, her appetite normalize. She could leave the house, panic attacks stopped. Yeah, that's one story of many, and it was very succinct. That's why I mention it.
Thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Parisi, and thank you, Dr. Acuna. So I know we had a lot of questions that we didn't get to, and that's okay, because one way for folks who didn't get their questions answered is by completing a post-event survey. And by completing that post-event survey, you'll get information on our Dr. Parisi's and Dr. Acuna's email address. So feel free to, complete the survey, and I'll post it here in the chat. And as folks, go through the chat, and we also have a QR code that I'll go ahead and share right now. I do want to have Dr. Parisi and Dr. Acuna, any parting advice or any parting words that both of you can share as, pre-medical students, as the audience here. What is advice that you have for us?
Cast a wide net. Don't be the one to say no. Let other people and programs and things say no to you. That's it.
Absolutely. Also, rely on your community. Find the people who will be your champions, who will support you, who will get you through the difficult times, and who will help you with the parts that you struggle in, or people who have strengths that you lack. Build your community, find your community. It is necessary to get through this. No one gets through this alone.
Perfect words. Thank you both so much. And with that, thank you everyone for coming to our Mi Mentor event. Feel free, as again, complete that post-event survey. This is a recorded event, so if you ever want to reflect back and re-listen to the words and the advice and the stories, to feel motivated again. I know it's like a long journey, but don't feel discouraged. We have two amazing physicians who just displayed their journey and their stories behind what it took, right? But that resiliency was still there. So thank you, everyone, and y'all have a great rest of your evening and week.
Thank you.